Is what it's called, the intersection of longevity and mental health. Looks like we have a very small group, which is great actually, because then we can maybe make this more of like an interactive workshop with everyone, get to know everybody, and possibly maybe even come to some conclusions together, which is kind of what we're hoping to do today. So my name is Elias Serjan. I started working with Renee initially on this topic because I work in the world of longevity. I'll go a little bit deeper into that in a moment, but I would like to first allow my sort of co-hosts to introduce themselves. So Jennifer, please go ahead.
So I'm Jennifer Enriquez. I'm the clinical director of two of La Ventana's residential programs. We have a mental health residential through outpatients. We also have chemical dependency as well. So I'm the clinical director of our women's programs, and it's an honor to be here today.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm probably the odd duck in the room. Before I built one of the largest platforms in healthcare in the Netherlands, traveled for 10 years to a lot of countries to think about improving healthcare in all layers. Helped a lot of organizations, mostly SMEs, and then it made me wonder, how can we make a world in which happiness, that's my theme, becomes more part of leadership in any shape and form. And longevity, a very, very important topic within the topic of happiness. So I created a happiness model. You're going to hear about it a little later. I even printed it out to hand it out to you as a first step towards a world where happiness becomes more central and humans to whatever we create in terms of cultures and context.
And then so on the longevity side, just I'm going to dive into what that is, because it's a term that's kind of vague, right? Like we may or may not even agree on what that means. So we're going to start with that potentially as a conversation. But come on in. But before I jump into defining the term, just like my co-host here, I'd like to just introduce a little bit of my background in longevity. I've spent the last 30 years interested in peak human performance. So 30 years ago, actually even before that, what actually triggered me is when I was a kid in high school. I kind of got in with the tough kids. I was smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, doing a lot of drugs. And then I realized that was like a dead-end life. So at 18, I was like, I got to make a change. And so I left my urban life and I went and lived essentially in like the farm country of Canada in northern Alberta with my grandfather. I was 18 and he was 78 years of age. He had me going around he's like, old school farm guy, you're living under my house, boy, you're going to work. And so he had me like trimming the hedge and mowing the lawn and like changing the car tires. And I'm like, and I'm 18. He is 60 years older than me. He is 78 years of age, and I could not keep up with him for 2 hours. And I went, wow. Like the light bulb just went right above my head, and I went, wow. The way you live your life is going to decide the way you are when you're older. And so I didn't work out, I didn't go to the gym. Next day, bought a gym membership, changed my life, and have spent 30 years interested in, originally I started in athletics in the peak performance side. I was a triathlete, I was studying exercise science, I was a personal trainer. I was coaching people on how to achieve peak performance in their athletics and on the exercise side. But then over the years, I did pre-med, but I didn't decide to pursue medical school. And I became interested in performance in all areas of life, entrepreneurship, physical, mental, spiritual, always. I lived in yogic ashrams to try to understand different traditions, Buddhist ashrams, yogic ashrams. So I really got interested in the idea of the whole thing. Fast forward to today, I'm just really trying to understand where all of these things can intersect, which is sort of the idea of today, right? Because we have someone who's a mental health professional, someone who's worked as a strong background in training for high-performing teams in the entrepreneurship space. So we're going to try to see if we can come to some ideas of how do we integrate all of these things as we enter this incredibly new era that we're in. But before we do, I think maybe let's do this exercise before we even do a roundtable of introductions.
Yeah.
So you can start that off.
Yeah, I think we have very different angles, which is, it's challenging but also fun, because I think you also have different angles. And maybe the term longevity, different continents, different countries, different terms. Here, longevity is the term. Sometimes it's healthy aging, productive aging, health span, healthy longevity. But longevity and the intersection of mental health, what do you feel, or what would you like to talk about? What do you like to get out of this session for us?
Yeah. So that's the question. We're gonna whiteboard it.
Yeah, I'm gonna write it down.
So what would you like to have as a key takeaway from today, personally?
And anybody can share, because the group is small enough. I can go like, or maybe someone wants to kick it up. Take a few seconds. Yeah, please.
Well, I'm pretty old. I'm gonna be 76 this year. So, 24 years to 100, and I'd like to make it there. So, I'm not in the best of health, but I'm not in the worst of health. I eat well. I walk as much as I can because I had a stroke and this side doesn't work very well. But I do have a dog, and she takes me for a walk.
That's good.
Several walks. So, do you have any suggestions for somebody who's already older? I mean, it's easy when you're young to start good habits.
Can I say older generation, or would that be offending? Can I say the older generation, or I don't want to be using?
I'm not easily offended.
All right.
That's why she's doing so well. Good. Okay, so strategies for, I would define that personally as strategies for health span extension or health span. And I'm going to talk about what health span means in a minute. But that's maybe how I would interpret it, but you can do
strategies.
Yeah, it's really about strategies. So that's great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I think maintaining or like building towards and especially maintaining kind of a very positive psychological, mental outlook, kind of positivity through aging. And I know there's like the Harvard study of the, it's like
It's the largest longitudinal study in human history. Yeah.
Connections and exercise, but if there was more kind of nuance to that or more on top of that.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've heard.
Yes, we can dive into
I'd
that.
love to hear.
Yeah, and we can add the Harvard
pros.
study. I
Yeah.
can talk about that. I've studied that rather extensively. Harvard study intersects with the blue zones and all of these other things you probably heard, but it's all, again, it's like stirring in the culture, but it's not entirely clear what's going on there.
Sure.
So we definitely can dive into that. Anything else? Please.
Yeah, so I feel like right now longevity is such an emerging, I mean for being like emerging themes in behavioral healthcare, I think longevity perhaps is the most essential emerging theme right now, from the perspective of just the aging population, you know, and it's also from the perspective of, in a sense, like the interplay between the microcosm of myself as an individual, or ourselves as individuals, and the macrocosm of our society as a whole. I think we live in a society in the United States which treats aging people perhaps as poorly as any first world country does. And so the question is, in the sense of how do we not only change our microcosm and improve our own chances of having productive and healthy longevity, as you mentioned, but also, in a sense, be able to influence the greater macrocosm from the perspective of, you're talking about happiness. I mean, the pursuit of happiness is written into our Declaration of Independence, and yet it seems to be ignored and taken over for a certain oligarchy that is developing in this country.
Yeah. This is absolutely down my domain, so I love. I can do a whole session about it. So the individual versus the collective. I love it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
That's really good. Like the social, the individual versus the societal relationship to longevity and how that all plays out with mental health. And that's a big topic, but a very good one. Did you have something over here?
Yes, I'd like to second that. That's part of why I came here today, because of your opener to yesterday.
Right.
That being in the longevity space, you said something to the effect of being interested in having people in mental health because of asking the question, well, if we're gonna live longer or be these super biomedical humans, but are we spiritually vacant? Are we happy?
Yep.
And I definitely come from a collectivist culture, but I've been here longer. My mom, who's 86, has also been now here in the United States longer than in her home country. And her shift, because of technology and just everything, to see her go from being more individualistic in her aging, makes me see like the preview.
Right.
Some of it's great, but some of it is, I'm more concerned about not being spiritually vacant and unhappy if I end up living
Yeah.
longer than she is already.
Right. Can I ask what culture?
Central American, I'm from El Salvador.
Okay. Right. Right. And yeah, definitely there's, I mean, that's again something I know Peter is often looking to. And I've also lived in like several different countries in my life and a lot of time in Latin America. I love the Latin American culture and Central and South America. They're all very different, of course. People don't realize how different they are. But yeah, I think that's a really, thank you for coming because yeah, that was exactly what I was trying to introduce yesterday. Someone else?
Sustainable happiness, like and loneliness connection. Those are very, very important.
But I like the cultural piece though too.
Yeah, okay.
Because we talked about society, but society and culture. Because we have, like you mentioned, like American society, but American society has a specific way we view the elderly and even this idea of like the pursuit of life and the pursuit of happiness, right? In America, it's a little bit different than how it is in some other cultures, and this is an important piece. So yeah, I think everybody can chime in. So feel free, anybody who hasn't spoken yet, to give us some ideas.
Well, I was just going to say, as a clinician, I'm a psychiatrist, and so as a clinician, I'd like to, I know we've got a short time today, but have some resources that I could look into to share with my patients, clients. I'm in my 50s, and so sometimes I walk in the waiting room and I'll see somebody who's my age and I'll look and they look maybe.
Yeah.
And I always think, well, how is our life different?
Yeah.
That, I think I look like an average 50-year-old woman, and then I see these people and I think, is it substance use, is it genetics, is it those sorts of things? And I would assume they have a shorter lifespan than I do. And how do I help people to make different choices so that they can have not just a longer life, but a better quality and more productive life?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that in 1 second, but yes, that's perfect. So resources.
Resources, practical tools. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Avoid shortcuts.
That's what we want.
Okay,
Shortcuts.
anybody else who hasn't spoken, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
I had a cardiac arrest about a year ago, and I was dead for 19 minutes. And I was in a coma for a long time, and I came out of it, and I had to relearn everything. And basically, the doctors told me I'm very, very lucky to be alive, and so I just feel so grateful. I have this whole new way of looking at life that I never had before, and I want to try to extend it as long as I can because I feel so very lucky, and I'm just curious to learn as much as I can about ways to make life meaningful for me and those I love.
That's a bloody miracle, my friend. 19 minutes, and you have full physical, mental, like no brain loss of, like no small strokes in the brain or anything like that. That is phenomenal. Like that is so. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I work with so many physicians and I hear so many medical stories. That's a phenomenal story. Amazing. Congratulations. Somebody's looking out for you. Yes.
I'd like to know, beyond age, what longevity is all about. It certainly feels like a good hook. I just crossed mid-century and I'd love to live to 100 or more.
Right.
But it seems like it's very Western-driven, all the things that we probably shouldn't do if we want to make it to 100. That kind of future goal and ignoring the here and now en route to that process. So I look at like what it is about like life that makes it worth living longer. And I imagine like all these people just aiming to live forever. Like I forget what they were called in Gulliver's Travel, people that never died, they just decayed away. Like, I don't want to live to 100 and be just decayed away. Right?
Yeah. That's going to be the first thing I'm going to talk about, actually. So I'm going to start there. But we first wanted to get this down, but absolutely.
How would you
great.
like to put this? I can think of many things like, so.
Yeah, just whatever works.
I could actually meaning and fulfillment till the very end, like till the end.
Okay. Yes, please.
I'm interested in the fear and the guilt associated with age and aging. On two sides of it, my mother passed away at 43, but I also have my grandmother who's 94.
Wow.
So it's like the fear of getting older, and then also the fear of getting older and the people who you're going to leave behind. Not everybody's going to be able to get older. So the fear and guilt that you have to battle associated with longevity and aging.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an interesting one that I feel like that for me is a big part of the conversation that I'm trying. That's one of the reasons why, like I said yesterday, I want to work with mental health professionals on this, because in my world, we're not even having the conversation around the emotional impact of death and life extension. And there's people who say we're not going to die. Like, I work with these people, and I've interviewed Brian John. I mean, you name all the people you've seen in longevity on the television or on the influencers. I know them. I've worked with them personally. So it's kind of I'll touch on that in a minute, but this is great. Thank you very much. I love that topic. And I think anybody else who hasn't spoken yet wants to share? You don't have to, but if anybody else wants to add a topic, because there's a lot here. So if we haven't hit anything, I'm going to just start by defining the term, if I can.
Yeah.
So thank you, Peter. So longevity is like a vague term, right? And like I think everybody touched on, like, what the heck does that even mean? So I actually don't like the term longevity. I'll be honest, even though I'm advertising myself, like I do a longevity leadership conference, I speak at events as a longevity speaker. The title of this topic, I use longevity because it's become a catch-all that people will look at and go towards. So I originally started on this 8 years ago with a term that you may have heard called biohacking. And so biohacking was an unknown term at the time, and I liked it initially because for me, biohacking had a very specific definition. And this is not what you think it is, but this is what we were defining it as 8 years ago. It's called this idea of like individual or personalized health optimization. So there's something in research called N of 1 for anybody who works in research, right? So you are like a research project of 1. So we look at all of your markers, your blood your genetics, your microbiome, your epigenetic expression, your wearable markers through your biometrics, all of these different markers, and we measure them, and then we look at how do we optimize you as a bio-individual. That was the original idea of biohacking. But then it became filled with like cults of personality and pseudoscience, and it sort of like has completely degraded. So I abandoned the term a couple years ago, and I picked up the term that I thought was where like the idea of like I'm going to skate to where the puck is going. So even though nobody knew the term 3 years ago, I picked up the term health span. Because that's what we all really want. And a couple of you already touched on this. If I told you right now that you could live an additional 10 years, I'll give you a pill. You're going to live an additional 10 years, but you're going to be on kidney dialysis. You're going to be dealing with like microstrokes all the time. You're going to lose the ability to walk and eventually just degrade and die, but you're going to live another 10 years. Who would sign up for that? Right? Maybe, but most people won't, right? Some people might, but most people. So what matters is not the length of your life, but the quality of your life. And the way you quantify that, or the word that explains that, is health span, the span of your health. How long can you have the functional vitality to engage in what is meaningful to you in your life? Now, some people that I talk to are like Olympic level skiers. So when they can no longer ski, that's for them the end of their health span, right? That's a pretty high bar, right? Like for them, like, you know, their knees give out or something like this, and they're like, oh, I can no longer ski, like my life isn't worth living almost anymore. For some people, that could be, you know, different levels. But that's why I like the term, because it allows us all to define it for ourselves and gets us thinking about like, what does health span mean for me and for my loved ones, and my ability to care for them. Because if you think about this too, like, we're actually entering an era of just, probably a big can of worms with this crude, but we're starting to have people choose that they maybe even want to end their life because they feel their lifespan is over. I'm from Canada, and we're doing that in Canada right now, that people can make the choice that my quality of life is so low, I'm going to opt out, right? So that's an interesting idea, if that's something that we support as a society, right? If we support that. Because like I said, some cultures in the world, some societies are starting to make that decision that people can do that. So to me, the term that I would like to get us to at least focus on is this idea of health span. Does that make sense to everyone? Does everyone, any questions on that as an idea? Because then that way we can swap out longevity, which is vague, and talk about health span.
Yeah, I don't want to be too critical, but health span, yes. I would like to add happy, because even if your body is fully physically perfect and you're 80, and you don't have any
quality of life.
Yeah, if you don't have a meaning, you don't have a purpose, you don't feel fulfilled, you don't have connection, then I want to add the emotional part of it.
Yeah, and that's actually what I think, and this is the thing that I said yesterday that has come to me as I've been investigating this and doing this. I'm working with people who are biologically optimized, so I can look at their blood markers and they're amazing. I can look at their microbiome and it's excellent. They have six-pack abs, in their 60s, and they're like ripped, and they're just miserable people. They're not happy with their life. And then I meet other people that have way less physiological, virality. No.
That's fine.
No, but I see people have way less physical virality. They don't look as vitally physically, but they are just loving life, right? So who has the better health span there, right? I would say the person who's happy is actually more in a state of health span than the person who's biologically optimized and is miserable. So that's kind of, so I'm including that.
Just want to clarify that that's absolutely included, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of health span, there's one thing which I don't think was brought up yet, which is mental deterioration.
Yes.
As opposed to just mental health, like my parents.
Cognitive decline, yeah.
Cognitive decline,
yeah.
Exactly. My parents are 87 and 85, and it's happening. And the question is, at what point does that become, in a sense of longevity, both in terms of where do you want to, it's such a complex question.
It is. That's what I was saying. We can all define for ourselves and our loved ones what that means when we're outside of that window of health span. Because all of us, to be honest, again, I work with people that say we're not, Brian Johnson has this whole movement called Don't Die, which says we're not even going to die. And some of these people are claiming we're going to live beyond because right now there's a belief, at least in the scientific side, I'll just touch on this and maybe hand it over, to hear from you in a minute, that the upper limit of any human is about 120 years. That's the longest that we have been able to verify. There's a lot of people, I don't know if you heard about this, but a lot of the Blue Zone research has been accused of being a lot of, the reason that people were living so long in that part of Okinawa, Japan, for example, is because they didn't have good birth records. Yeah. So in Okinawa, a lot of these blue zones, that they targeted, that they said people were over centenarians, they were over 100 years. It's actually in parts of there was somebody who went and independently went and analyzed this, and they found that there was a correlation between the blue zones and where they had really bad history of birth records.
But I've been to Japan and Okinawa. I've been there.
Yeah, and I've been there too, actually.
Yeah, to the point of the integration of elderly helping schools.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is something. I'm not throwing the blue zones under the bus completely. There's a lot there that I value, but I'm just saying that I think we also have to look at this from a couple different levels. So one thing I just want to mention is that the upper limit we think is 120 years. The claim that is being made, actually this claim I think is real. I think the person who's going to live beyond 120 years has already been born. That's absolutely true. I think I even know who the guy might be. I know some candidates that I would put, there's this guy I know is in his 30s and he's just been so into this, from the time he was 18, he is just a superhuman. He's a superhuman in all ways. And actually even his wife and partner, both of them, I would not be surprised if those two live beyond 120, just naturally, without any gene editing therapies or organ transplants, just biologically. They started so young. So that's kind of what we think is the upper limit, but there is a real potential for us to be able to extend that beyond 120 years because there's this idea called longevity escape velocity. Has anyone ever heard of this? No? You've heard of this, yeah. So Aubrey de Grey, he speaks at my conference this October. He introduced this idea like 20, 30 years ago, and everybody thought he was completely insane. And he's been vindicated because it's actually now kind of possible. He said if you could live, 30 years ago, he said if you could live about 30 years, we're going to come up with technologies that are going to allow you to live 10 more years. We're in that window right now. There is technologies that I know right now that wherever you are, I know technologies that could extend your life 10 years. Like I could literally do the analysis on you with a group of physicians and we could give them to you like right now. It's real.
But how expensive would those?
That's the thing. A lot of them would be very expensive.
Privilege.
Yeah, you have to have the money. So, it's like you have to have the money to fly into space, right? So they get access. I mean, Jeff Bezos was like a wimpy little nerd. Now he's this like jacked dude, right? Because he got access to all the peptide therapies and stem cells and all that stuff.
Is he happy? That's the question. Exactly.
So the idea is then now, okay, I have technology today that I could extend your current health span, or at least lifespan, if not your health span, at least extend your lifespan 10 more years. In the 10 years where we are right now, AI is going to develop treatments that could potentially extend your life another 10 years. So you live those extra years, by the time you get into that, there may be more technology that could extend your life another 10 years. So the idea is that we end up this longevity escape velocity where the upper limit of human lifespan becomes like an unknown quotient. That's the idea. I'm not saying I completely agree with it, but it is theoretically something we could be moving towards in the near future. But it may not be possible. We may not be able to. There may be like almost some people that I work with as well. There's two camps in my world. There's the longevity escape velocity camp, and then there's the people who think we have like a genetic kill switch. That 120 is like the cutoff, and that no matter what we do, like there's something that's gonna just like turn off the system, and that we're gonna have to do like major work to get beyond it. So, okay, with that said, I'd like to move into a little bit more, and I'd love for you to talk about, because your perspective on this that you've brought.
We did have a question though.
Oh,
that
okay.
I want to be respectful.
It's, maybe you can touch on it later, because it may be a bigger subject, but
Okay.
in terms of the research into things like life extension, kind of hard science in that way, we are cutting funding for science now, and our funding has always been, the way that we fund science has always been a little mixed in the United States, and probably in other countries. There's different
Avenues.
avenues, but also focus areas.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
like where things are just most important. The things that are deemed most important and money is funneled into. I'm wondering if you felt that if we put if we put this as a high priority as a nation or as a worldwide kind of priority, and more money was flowed into the science, if the things that you're talking about would be far more achievable because of the amount of resources.
Hold me accountable. I'll come back to that.
It was like
Yeah, but I have a really good answer for that, but hold me accountable to it. I'll come back.
And if you want to have cultural, I can give you the answer from different countries, how they do it differently, and
okay.
So when this was presented to me, when Christy came, she's like, "You're going to speak on longevity." I was like, "Oh my gosh," because I'm coming from the perspective of when my clients come to me. Our first Zoom session, I was like, clients are coming to me off of a suicide attempt. I speak to them on longevity, and they go, "I can't see a day in front of me." And so speaking on longevity seems impossible. And so I frequently talk about, let me hold the hope for you at times. And so, my perspective on this is, how do I take this theme of emerging themes and creative approaches within this mental health and behavioral health aspect with residential clients. And so I want to tell a story of one of our prominent clients that we had. A little bit of the background with La Ventana is when someone calls in, you know, we do the assessment and they're deemed to be in residential care, which means they need 24/7 care because they're a risk that they cannot be in an outpatient level. And then I get on the call with them and I do a welcome call, I introduce myself, we go over goals, you know, what are we wanting to kind of attain, and I go over safety risks. And with this particular client, some of her safety risks was she was 46, she'd been self-harming since she was 16, and there was substance abuse history for the last like 20 years or so. And so, you know, we talked about, you know, you're gonna have urges, but are you able to commit to not engaging in self-harm? And I know that's a big ask because I'm asking you for 30 years of active engaging in self-harm. And she was saying no. And, you know, I went back and forth because I know I have to go to our boss and go, I'm not allowing a client in. She's saying no to treatment because I'm holding this line for her. And that was on a Thursday. And I don't work on the weekend, or this weekend I wasn't working. And so on that Thursday, she was saying, I can't do it. I'm not gonna do it. Other treatment centers have done harm reduction with me. And I said, okay, how did that work for you? And she goes, well, the agreement was 3 days a week. And I said, well, how often were you self-harming? And she said 7. I said, okay, so it's not working. So can we think about it? Come back to me. She called admissions on a Saturday. And I don't work on Saturdays. It's working out. And I took the call. Because I was like, this is the one. If I'm gonna get her at a moment of desperation, I'm taking that moment of desperation. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but you might. Okay, so it was a Saturday. She picked up the call and she goes, okay, I'll be there on Monday. I have no idea if this is even gonna work, but I'll try, I'll give it a try. And so she came in and it was an hour by hour by hour for 2 months straight in residential.
Well,
And there's evidence-based modalities that the clinicians and the professionals, you know, in the field, psychiatrists can go to, where we were doing CBT, we were doing DBT, we were doing all these interventions, and this is compacted with severe childhood abuse, and she was having flashbacks, dissociating, not recognizing how long time was going by. And so self-harm for her was a way to be present. And so we had to get really, really creative in how to keep her present. And so one of the things that it goes with my outfit today, but I brought my Fitbit, because one of the things we started to get creative with, and this is where I'm kind of coming into with this conference, is trying to inspire you to look outside of the box. Because what we've been doing is we'll take like your iPad, connect your Fitbit or your phone or whatever it might be, and we created from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every 10 minutes check-in. And so the Fitbit would go on and it would just vibrate and no one else would know. And it would vibrate on her and it'd be a check-in. And it would go, okay, I need to check in with my system and go, where am I at right now? Physically, emotionally, and mentally. Because that's how often she needed to check in with herself, because she wasn't aware of how often she was dissociating. She wasn't aware of how often those urges were coming up, and so we started tracking them. So we started doing Fitbits for flashbacks. We started doing, yes.
Just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Were any of those initial check-ins with was it initially like accountable to someone else, or was it?
So they had to be, right?
Oh,
so
was it?
I remember I was doing a session with her, and her dissociation. So for those in the room that don't know what dissociations are when there's a disconnect, right? Where they're not sort of recording what's happening, right? They're not physically present. And so we use grounding techniques, whether it's through smell, through something with your eyes, through something with touch, through taste, to be able to bring them to the present moment. So I was having a session with her. About 5 minutes in, we started talking about self-harm. And then I noticed towards the end, I was like, I don't think she's here. So we did some grounding techniques, brought her back, and I said, what's the last thing you remember? And it was in the beginning of the session. She didn't remember about 40 minutes of the session. So I started going, okay, we need to start doing these sort of micro sessions. We started doing, hour-long every hour check-ins wasn't enough. half-hour check-ins wasn't enough. 15-minute check-ins wasn't enough. So we got it down to 10 minutes, and that seemed to be enough. So we had to get really creative with what this looked like for this patient. So we were doing this 10-minute check-ins. We were doing these ice bears, which were essentially, you know, those like water jugs. They're kind of like flexible. We usually put hot water in them. We were freezing them, putting them in what like is like a hollowed out teddy bear, and we put it on their chest because we have our vagus nerve, right, our vagal nerve, and so we would having them breathe, and we would put essential oils on the head, and they'd be grounding in that way. We'd do warheads, so we were doing all these interventions to try to get their system back online. So that is a lot of like what our approaches are doing, and then there was these shifts. So again, we had her for 2 months. That work was a lot of our work within these first 3 to 4 weeks. Then we were able to sort of dive down into more of that trauma work. So she kept in touch with me. This was a client of ours about 3 years ago. And it's hard in residential because we have them for such a short amount of time. And so with this piece of longevity, we get the small check-ins of, you know, this is how I'm thriving now, or the, you know, therapist will kind of consult. And so with this client, it's been such a joy to see for her. She is in the healthcare field. So when we think of like biology-wise, you know, she, from the outside perspective, had it all together. She was a nurse, she was thriving, she was in shape, right? She, from the outside, everything was checked off. She had all of it. But on the inside, she was falling apart. Would dissociate and crumble down into the fetal position. And so we had to sort of build that piece back up and build that resiliency within her. And so now she does these check-ins. I get one maybe every 4 to 6 months, which is so nice because it's such a gift to us, right? We usually don't get that. And so now she's, you know, continuing in her sobriety. She hasn't self-harmed since she's been with us. So that's 3 years after 30 years. And so when I think of longevity, for me, on my side, it's that piece. It's how do I have the planting of these seeds for long-term maintenance of their mental health, and then we bring in all of these pieces of what genuine happiness does look like. And we ask these questions of what does a life of purpose mean? What does a life worth living mean, right? And for my clients, sometimes it's this, I can't even fathom what that looks like, to maybe I start to get a glimpse of hope of what it could be, a taste of it, right? And so it's kind of, it's a gift to be able to be part of this panel because we have such a spectrum of it, from sort of like their lowest moment to the potentials of what it could be, and all the aspects of it in between.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful story.
I think I think to me that's exactly what brings me to this, is that idea that I'm wondering, like for those people, like for me to come in and talk about all my longevity stuff to them, it's like, what Matt, like forget it, you know what I mean? Like it's irrelevant in that context, right? Completely irrelevant. So this is the thing. So I want to take this from, I want to talk, because you talk about the individual, let's take that collective. We live in a world right now, right, where we know anxiety, depression rates, mental health challenges are just becoming like endemic across the society, right? Lack of happiness. So maybe this is a way to segue into you, right? That's like an individual. Yeah. We have a lot of those individuals in our society. I mean, you come from a country, I think, that's voted sometimes one of the happiest countries in the world, the Netherlands. You know, so maybe we can talk about, like, from your perspective, why do you think this is happening in the US, and maybe even seems to be even more intense in this country from a cultural perspective, from a social perspective, and like how do we relate to the rest of the world? Is this happening everywhere in your experience? Is this something that's more concentrated in the US right now amongst our young people, or just across the population? Like, what are your thoughts there?
It's happening everywhere in the world, but the US is always the number one. Also, and China's actually.
We're number one. We're number one.
Together with China.
USA,
So you guys.
USA.
So China, USA lead the pack. But it's It's stress. I mean, it's stress. So I don't want to be disrespectful for any mental issues. There is a percentage in society that people just, you know, are born or have trauma, have incidents in their life. But there's a substantial percentage that is just unnecessary. It's unnecessary stress. And the US, because the differences in different cultures where stress comes from. In China, it's really more social pressure, like loss of face. But here, it's really the pressure to perform and the pressure that in education. And actually, your parents want the best for you. So they already want you to perform well in schools, want you to go to the best schools. And all that pressure you're going to carry with you. And maybe also because I created a model that helps way better to have this conversation, because a lot of us are pursuing. If you're already pursuing happiness, you're not on the right track. Anything you're pursuing outside of yourself is basically already not sustainable. You're trying to materialize. Even like getting your degree, even if you're really getting good in doing something, but then you want to monetize it, you lose it. How many times do you hear stories of people that, like top athletes or people that were really good in something, and then it became this thing of like earning money, and they lost themselves in it. So it's important, because this happens in life. On a daily, on a weekly, on a yearly, I'm dealing with like external stuff as well, and also you need it in a way. But it's important to realize what is driven from the inside. And people are lost. I mean, if I ask you the question, what's your purpose? Would you dare to say do you feel you have a good purpose? Well, I mean, you had a beautiful. It's not a beautiful story, but it's amazing how you survived and now have a different outlook on life. It's mostly shocking life events, losing somebody that you really is close to you, or having an accident. People first need to get into an accident, or something shocking needs to happen for them to wake up from what really matters in life. Do you feel right now you found that a purpose for you to live, for a meaning, something that gives you a reason to, you know, enjoy the day or the week? Or
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that used to bother me or worry me, I feel like is really trivial, and I regret I let it bother me for so long.
Yeah, so that's like a massive perspective shift, the major pattern interrupt in your life by what happened there. Okay, I want to make sure we cover some of the other things that have been brought up here.
Is it okay, Elias, that I share this?
Yeah, I feel like we need to just keep I just feel like we need to keep the conversation going, because we don't have that much time, and I want to make sure we cover some of these things. Okay, about that. So, resources and practical tools. We should end with this. So, meaning and fulfillment. Till the end. I think like you just touched on this, you touched on this. Maybe, so what, in that individual, for that person, how do you talk to somebody and try to get them to feel like, you know, there is hope, right? Because that's kind of, would you say that's part of what she needed to feel like she could keep going, was hope? Or what would you define that as? Like, what do you give that person so that they have that desire to keep going in that place?
It's not my answer for her, it's her finding it.
Right.
Because I can't give it to her.
Right.
My definition is not going to hit, right? And so it's part of therapy is like finding this journey. It's really parallel, right? It's finding the journey together, but it's them finding the answer. And so for her, it's been this like reconnection with family. It's been healing these like wounds within her, right? It's been finding that like people are not always going to hurt me, right? It's been that I can have intimate relationships that I don't always have to push away. And so a lot of it was like this connection piece for her,
right.
Created like this life that didn't feel so scattered and lonely. So.
Okay, so loneliness and connection, right? Yeah.
So vital.
You know, I've been sober for 17 years. My old sponsor used to say to me, if you want to explain what addiction is about, it's about two fears. One, I'm not worthy of love, and two, that I'm not going to be taken care of. And I think what you were talking about was like that there are no external answers to internal problems. And so when it comes to like in the sense of like when you ask like how do you give you hope? Like I'm not trying to give people I work with in closer programs. I mean, yeah, I try to give them hope. I'm trying to give them a tool belt.
Right.
I'm trying to give them, my other sponsor is just another sponsor, who I work 12 steps with. So you don't work the 12 steps once just to work them. They become a tool belt for you to apply on a regular basis. They become a way for me to function on this planet. And you brought up stress. I don't think there's anything as destructive to longevity right now in this society than stress. I think stress is toxic and poison.
And the connection, the Harvard study was mentioned since 1938, and absolutely it's connections. I mean, yes, of course, help with connections. And connections also helps you to get, and actually to have the motivation.
What is the Harvard study?
So there was a large longitudinal study. It's the largest longitudinal study that's ever been done that was continuously done. It's not even being done with the children of the original participants. So they took a large cohort of people and they wanted to essentially analyze, like, first, I think they started thinking it might be like a genetic predisposition. Like, we've had this theme for a long time in our culture. We thought actually when we mapped the human genome, it was going to solve everything. And so they thought, like, if they could map the genes of these individuals, they could identify over their genes, like, who was going to actually have the right genetic combination to live the longest lifespans. But what they found was not their genes, not their diet, not even their exercise levels. It was the quality of their social relationships that defined the length of their life. So they found that the amount, not the amount of friends. So it's not like the amount of friends you have on Facebook means you win, right? Or Instagram followers, right? It's the quality. If they had a larger group of, coming back to like collective families, right? So if we look at the blue zones, to circle back to which that was brought up, we look at it like these blue zones, right? What do they have? They have moderate levels of exercise that they do, meaning that a lot of times they would just go to the grocery store every day and they would walk, right? So they would just walk with their dog, or they would walk to the grocery store every day and they would keep moving their bodies. But they also probably had things where they did creative expression. Dr. David yesterday played drum for us, and music, singing, dancing. One of the other studies that I'm sure most of you in this room know about that outperformed SSRIs was singing and dancing, right? In terms of improving the depression outcomes. So the quality of the relationships, but also the nature of those relationships, feeling like they were interconnected into a group. So when we talk about like
the ability to be vulnerable and safe at the same time.
Yes, so 12-step groups, right? Like these groups where you feel like you can step into a space where you can share and be vulnerable, but still at the same time not like be
used as a weapon against you.
Exactly, right? So if you have that kind of toxic family relationship and you tell your sister or sibling, whatever, brother or whatever, people around you, and they're just like attacking you because you've given them that vulnerability, that's not gonna like extend your health span. It's like when the people that you feel really, really supported in that community, that was the #1 predictor of longevity, basically, or lifespan. So that was the study. So that's kind of, I think, our baseline. So when we talk about like practical tools, if we really wanted, like you mentioned, like part of I can give you a lot of biological things because that's my area of expertise that I could tell you to do. And maybe I'll talk about those at the end a little bit more. If you guys want some practical tools, I'm happy to give those to you. But the overarching theme is the quality of those relationships.
Yeah, and there's a quality in connection, of course, because people can have 15,000 connections on Facebook, Twitter, or what have you. That's maybe helping you in your external achievements, but it's not bringing you anything. It's
I
like
always ask people, like, who do you call if
Yeah.
something happens in the world?
Yeah.
Who's showing up?
Who's going to show up for you no matter what?
And-
But you might have neighbors or friends that you say hi to, but if they're not someone you have their number and you can say, I'm in trouble, I need you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the thing is, people don't invest in connections anymore. I'm pretty sure back in the days that you have a few good friends, and then when you have a conflict, then you will reconciliation is very important. That creates strong relationship. Right now, you have enough other friends, so you just move on. I don't want to get drama or hassle. So there's no investment anymore in the real connections that people make, and they actually are so important for us. And of course, your intimate relationships, very, very important. Those are the main predictors for people to have happier and longer lives. And sorry, you have a question.
If we need to rush,
No, it's okay. I mean, we can talk about whatever we want to talk about at that time.
When I brought that up specifically, it was like, okay, we've done this study, and everybody seems to point to it, right? But
Yeah.
There can be a problem in science where when one study comes out and it makes it in Nature,
Yeah.
American, we're like, okay, we've got the answer, everything's good, that's the thing. And I'm not saying, I mean, clearly it is maybe the biggest indicator, but I'm wondering if there are other maybe kind of smaller things that the study hasn't captured that you as people with longevity could also see.
Yeah, I mean, I could really dive in. So
And maybe later, but.
well, no, maybe that's a good segue. So I'm going to pick up on what you said about that, like that therapy is designed for the individual. In the same way, you were asking about practical tools as you get older, and that's come up a couple times. The reality is from the biological side, we're all bio-individuals. Every person in this room, believe it or not, is 40 trillion, with a T, 40 trillion human cells. And you're 40 trillion bacterial cells. You're only half human. The microbiome on your skin, in your gut, in your tissues, the mitochondria that power your cells are an ancient bacteria that we evolved to be able to digest and produce energy. And if you believe in a creator, we were created to do that. However, I don't really care how you approach it, right? But the fact is, the science on that we know. So you have four, and maybe I'll just share this with you all just because we can look into this, but this is what we do in functional medicine. We look at your primary bio-individual markers. So we look at your individual genetics, right? We look at your microbiome, which is, like I said, that half of you is your microbiome, so we kind of got to look at that. We look at your blood labs, which I'm sure most of you go to the doctor at least once a year and you get your blood labs. That tells us something, right? So it's your biochemical blood, urine, saliva. We look at, and this is the thing, I don't know if any of you use this, I have fallen in love with EEGs. Because to me, an EEG shows me an insight into the brain health and personality of an individual in a way that no other tool I have found works. And then we look at your biometrics. So for example, I'm wearing an Oura ring, maybe some of you have an Apple Watch. You can look at your sleep, you can look at your HRV, you can look at some of these markers. The bar mark, if you want some simple tool that I could give you to walk out of here with, there's something called HRV, or heart rate variability. And all of us have an HRV that fluctuates. The absolute number of your HRV is irrelevant. So you could have an HRV of 20 is your average, or you could have like they say the more the better, but I don't even worry about that. If you're monitoring your HRV, you can monitor it continuously and monitor your sleep, but you can improve what you can't measure. I mean, this is just my world, this is the way I look at it. So you can measure these things, and then we can come up with like bio-individual programs. And that's why I say I know if I got all of that data for each and every one of you, I could put together a program of supplementation, dietary interventions, the right type of exercise, the right type of even maybe peptide therapies or some other therapies. But as was brought up earlier, right now, like it's relatively expensive. Like there's thousands of doctors that I go to these conventions where there's thousands of doctors doing this type of functional treatments, and they've all opted out of the healthcare system. It's all cash pay. So the people who can afford this right now are doing it.
So this is the U.S. approach to
yes, it's a very U.S. approach.
Very US.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is because the U.S. has that approach, all of the innovation in this is happening in the U.S. right now. So my hope is that the work we're doing in that space, we're kind of the tip of the spear figuring this out, right? Because these people are essentially paying for the beta testing on themselves to optimize their health. And as we develop the best tools and techniques, this becomes something that we could, hi Renee, this becomes something that we could potentially learn to become standard of care elsewhere around the world. And that is already happening.
So I'm gonna, yeah.
There's just two words that are not up there that I think should really be up there.
Okay.
Love and service.
Right.
Yeah, giving is really, absolutely.
Because basically being of service, doing for others without expectation of getting anything in return, I think is a huge part of longevity. And I think loving, regardless of whether you're loved or not, but believing that love creates love, is essential.
So we live in a society where the news and everybody has learned how to be their unique selves. And there's a lot of tools to amplify that and boost that, which is on the one hand great, although we're not really working on our authentic selves. We try to be the people that we look up to. We lost a little bit. So in the Netherlands, there's 80 million people, and there's 80 million different unique stories. There's no collective story anymore. And in that collective story, there's giving. A lot of people, what people do is transactional. They have connections or they do things to achieve something outside of themselves. They don't do things to give and to make connection. And to your point, that's, I think, lost in society. And that's just the point I want to make. In the US, innovation is driven from the private sector. You got one of the best innovations worldwide, but it doesn't reach everybody in the US, let alone internationally. So you got the big companies here, and you got the newest innovation. But if you see and I'm being a little bit, the base here for everybody, the differences in LA, the contrasts are huge. So for just a citizen, the leadership is unable, or I don't know what's happening here, but education, healthcare, mobility, there's a lot of technology out there, and that's the difference, I think, in Europe. I think there's a lot of innovation happening in Europe, but it's more driven by the government and the companies to join in to make it accessible for everybody. So while you have huge innovations here, which might eventually, hopefully, for everybody available, right now it's just for 5% of the people. That's us sitting in this room here. That's great for us, but what about the other people?
That divide could lead to a revolution.
Absolutely, the gaps are growing, and if the gaps are growing, then you can be as rich as well, but you're going to need to build walls. I'm dramatizing a little bit, but you want to have a society where you can do things together, and that's a systematic change, and we're not going to solve that in this room, but that's where I come from, new leadership that...
Yeah. I'm curious, and maybe you can do this, and maybe you can actually help us, because I want to come back to this somehow. I want to find a way back to, I guess maybe, I know you introduced the concept. Could you maybe just, in the conversation we've had, tell me what we've missed around the idea, the fear or guilt of aging or caring for aging family? Or?
I think I'm probably hitting more of the trauma and the emotional side of it. I'm an LMFT, so that's kind of how I think. But so for instance, like I mentioned, my mother passed away when she was 43,
right.
And I'm 30. So right now I have this fear of aging. Will I make it to 43? So there's that component. And then I also have my grandmother who is 94. Her mind is kind of leaving her, and her body's not there, but she's still alive. So then there's that guilt because she's the only one left of her family. So and again, it's going to go to another question I was going to ask. What quality is it for the world if only a certain type of people can make it to that what we were just talking, make it to that age? So it seems like the message is not everybody's going to be able to make it there, obviously, but you have to be a certain type of person to make it there. You have to have money, you have to have wealth. And so, and I'm not sure if I'm explaining it, maybe I get some help with trying to tap into what I'm saying. It's just, what good is it going to be if it's only for a certain, like the Jetsons? That's what I'm thinking. You have the people who got all the technology, but wasn't there another world going on down where they didn't have access to that?
Right.
And so what is it the quality just because you have the money to live long, or what is it?
Well, this ties into lobbying, political will, investment, so I'll tie into that, but first maybe you can answer the fear and guilt side of the question. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I want to touch on one thing that you said. I think we don't have to have access to the top 5% money to be able to connect to quality of life with longevity. I mean, yes, there's going to be different aspects that people with more money are going to have, right? But when we think about within our subsystem, right, within our dynamic in our family systems, what does quality of life look like for us? It's going to look different for everybody else. I love that you have insight to say, because I'm an LMT, right, too, to say that I'm 10 years away from where my mom passed away. And so you already have insight to know that the closer I get to that age, there's the fear of aging. Yes. That fear is going to come closer and closer and closer and higher and higher and higher. And I just want to validate that my heart's racing for you. That's so hard to go through. has a daughter. And I think that's like that trauma piece of, I lost my mom, I'm coming up to that age, but I also have my grandmother who's aging. I think the guilt part is like, it comes to that survival's guilt of like, when you pass that age of when your mother had passed, it's I'm now past the age that she was. I think that's where we get to be individual in our healing and say, okay, I need to do my work in what does this look like for me, of how do I honor my feelings, how do I honor my mom, how do I honor with this new journey, whatever this kind of looks like. Because the fact that you're bringing it up tells me that you're kind of wrestling with it, that it's something that's kind of on your mind, right? When we're talking about longevity, you're like, fear and guilt, that's my go-to, right? And so it's honoring that piece, but then going, okay, what do I do with it? I know that I'm fearful of this future. I know that I feel guilty that, you know, my grandmother's older and I'm getting past, or I will be eventually, right? How do I honor what that looks like for me? And is it like a celebration? Is it like cathartic exercise? Is it like, what is that for me? I don't know. That's something to kind of like bring in and right kind of process. What was the other part that we were talking about?
So that fear and guilt you're saying is an expression of trauma.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
Can I play scientist here for a second, though, if you don't mind, or clinician, I guess, in the biological science? So your mother said you passed away what did she pass away from? Do you mind sharing? Or?
She had pneumonia.
Oh, okay.
It was just very quick.
Right. So it was a sudden infectious disease and is this your maternal or paternal grandmother who's still with you?
It's her mother.
It's her mother.
Yes.
Okay. So can I just give you, this is by no means like clear diagnostic tool, but I'll just let you know, like, I often say this to people because I'm lucky, I feel like I'm genetically lucky. The reason I feel confident to say I can live 100 healthy years is because I have a maternal grandparent that lived to 92 and a paternal grandparent that lived to 93. So that means I know I have the genes to make it at least to my 90s, and then with my best efforts, I figure I can easily hit 100, right? So if this is from the same genetic line that your grandmother is still around, and again, by no means is this statistically significant, but it sounds to me like that the genetic line is strong enough to make it to their 90s. What happened to your mother sounds more like it was an infectious disease anomaly. Yeah, circumstances. So in longevity, we talk about two things. We talk about genetic expression and epigenetics. Epigenetics is what turns on and off the genes of expression. So your genetic lineage of the maternal side to make it to 93, that's a good sign. Like your longevity, your potential for longevity, I would say just on that alone, I would not be very fearful of. I would feel confidence from that, right? And what happened to your mother, I think you stressed more the guilt piece to that, which, is maybe something to work with. But I just want to let you know from a genetic standpoint, like that's good news. To me, I hear that and I'm like, oh, that's great. Like on that your grandmother on the maternal side has lived that long, that's a good genetic signal for longevity.
Just to add to it, like in regards to longevity, I wonder if that, not just my circumstance, but I'm sure a lot of people have that similar circumstances. Yeah. And it could be a barrier to wanting to pursue longevity because of the fear, because sometimes, and I know this as a therapist, you will start to self-sabotage yourself. If you think, for my instance, 43 is the cap that I'm
right.
And so if you're looking at teaching longevity or incorporating that, it's trying to figure out what are the barriers that is keeping you from not wanting to extend that life or work to get to that extent of longevity.
What kind of talks about, like when you first talked about, if I give you a pill, but you're going to be on kidney dialysis, you're going to be like, it's not a life worth living, right? It's not quality. Yeah. So when we look at barriers, we also look
got a
at
question.
Yeah. I think, could you maybe, so I think, Peter, maybe just take us, we're going to do this handout on the way out, maybe that you can give people, because we're going to have to wrap this up. I like to try to be on time for everyone. So do you want to make like some closing comments and share what you're going to be sharing with everyone before they go?
Yeah, so it's a little bit reverse introduction and outroduction, I would say. I think, have you heard of Maslow? I think most people in your field have heard of Maslow. So that's the base. That's what he.
Abraham?
No.
Abraham Maslow. So it's a model from 1943. It has been revised a few times, which is basically saying the hierarchy of needs, the basic needs for human beings towards self-actualization, the full potential of the human. And it starts with physiological needs, water, shelter, safety, belonging and love, connection, family, self-esteem, and then self-actualization. So I was fascinated about it, not having studied psychology, but really interesting intercultural differences and social sciences. And the one thing I picked up is that if you, the majority of the people, come into this world and you have healthy parents that take care of you, they love you, you don't have an ego yet, you have food and water, you in theory, you're already in the top of that pyramid. So from an early age, you can actually start already being authentic and like tapping into your passion and already like start. However, in this world, what's happening throughout life, we sort of, it's a pyramid with a finite tip. We sort of try to struggle through life to maybe make it to that self-actualization. That's sort of how we go to study and then get a good job and then we get a good house and we get a good family and then. So this is sort of what society tells us, but what if in an ideal world from young on we can stay authentic, we can be self-expressive, we're not being judged and we let others be and we can learn how to translate our talents and passions into a lifestyle that has some purpose. So that's what I've been building up to and that's why you see the pyramid on the bottom here. It's actually an infinite pyramid because then you start with transformation. You start thinking about how can you grow as an individual and it's infinite. The big thing that I discovered, and even the Tony Hawks of this, the Tony Robbins is also amazing. I love this documentary, by the way. He's a great example of what I just mentioned. He just followed his passion, he pushed it through, and eventually, anyway, other story, a great story. So what I realized is people don't make a distinction between driven from intrinsic drivers, doing the things they do, or driven from external drivers. We learn in this world, in this economic world, from a very young age to achieve things outside of ourselves, look like somebody that we idealize, or our parents want us to be safe and tell us what they know. So we are deviating more and more and more from who we are and what we actually want. This morning, I'm not sure, were you all there this morning with the Coen brothers? Mm-hmm. Amazing. That's stepping into who we are. That's stepping into the energy of like, dare to suck. I love it. Just do it. That's bringing us back to who we are. That gives us like inspiration. Like I like this kind of stuff. So you got and the fundamental part is very important. And then from there you go to artistry, like a sort of a sense of freedom. I don't call it self-actualization. I feel like if you have a sense of freedom, from there you can start growing to altruism. And it's still a balance. If you're just being Mother Teresa all the time, believe me, that's not going to go well for you. Because you need to take care of yourself to take care of others. And also in this world is finding this sweet spot of like, you do need to earn some money to pay the bills. And especially in the US, that's where it comes the systematic part. It's very expensive here to be yourself. I come from, yeah, really. So I come from North Europe, and I love Costa Rica as an example in South America. They show you, I mean, go into the case, we don't have time for that, but look into Costa Rica. Amazing, phenomenal. They don't have a military, they only invest in the environment community. Top 6 most happy country in the world. Phenomenal. So it's a balance. And if the cost of living is so high, you must think about paying your bills, because if not, you might end up sleeping in your car. Or elsewhere, and that's the problem. What's happening here, and I'm privileged. I always joke like I have a European passport. I think we have other issues. We're not so much in the transformational. Good is good in North Europe. I think people have more to offer in this world, but at least we don't have to stress so much about the finances, which makes the work-life balance much better, and stress levels are a little lower. So that's my little spiel. I make a test. Then I'm going to stop. Okay. Sorry, I lied.
Yeah, that's okay.
So I'm inviting anybody that wants to collaborate to get this story out and change leadership. I made, the 16 personalities test? Mm-hmm. So I made the 9 appetites of happiness test. It's not putting you in a box, but it's showing you your predominant drivers for happiness. And it's showing leaders and it's showing organizations what their predominant drivers are. If you know, you can start playing with it. So that's the model, what the model is about.
So make sure you grab one of these on the way out. We're going to end up in a minute. So I'm going to end with a bunch of longevity tips I'm going to give you guys to take with you. So I think a lot of people seem to come up, so I'm going to give you some real practical things. Before I do, maybe you could help us, and I'd like to hear this from you. What are some practical longevity tips from a mental health standpoint that we could use? Because I'll talk about the biological, but could you give us some mental health strategies that all of us can actually go and apply, like real things we can do?
Yeah. So, Sharon Volner, we've been talking about do the work. You have got to show up and do the work, whether it's doing the 12 steps and get in and get dirty and get uncomfortable, right? If you're not doing the work, you're something that we talked about was, Elias was talking about, some of the people he works with are biologically thriving when they should be doing the trauma work. Right? And so for me, it's get into therapy. If you can't afford therapy, get into the 12 steps rooms. If it's not, then it's looking at making sure you're asleep, making sure you're eating, get connected with authentic relationships. There's meetup groups. It doesn't have to cost money. There's going to be all sorts of resources as far as like therapy goes, as far as like sliding scales. There's going to be, I'm just trying to think of like, what's the elevator speech? When it comes down to it, it's for each one of us, it's what's going to be my barrier that you were talking about that's going to bring me to this next level, right? Is it going to be a resentment that I need to start working through, right? Is it going to be a relationship that I need to be letting go of? Is it going to be a habit that I need to be pushing through or letting go of, right? So for everybody else, it's going to be something different that's going to create more quality in my life and in my relationships for more longevity.
Actually, you know what? That's a very cool thing. So in longevity, we have this idea, or at least like in the biological side, there's this new thing that's been discovered recently that every organ system in your body generates a number of like proteomes, or essentially markers that we can identify the biological versus chronological age of that system. So you mentioned this before. You could be 50 years old biologically, but your kidneys could be 70, your heart could be 30 though, because you could be like an athlete with an athlete's heart. So one of the things we talk about in this, with this new, and this is the cutting edge science right now that is billions is being invested in to understand this. There was something that was discovered by Dr. Yanamako called the Yanamako factors, where we can start to identify the aging factors of different organ systems. So we look at like what is going to kill you first, basically, and we work at that. And what I hear you saying is like, what is the thing that is going to prevent you from moving forward in your life, and address that first? I hear that as the same idea. Yeah. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so without all that testing, I can't tell you what your proteome factors are from your different organ systems. So let me give everybody some generic things you can apply, okay? So there's the three, what we call the three big buckets, right? Sleep, prioritize sleep. Prioritize sleep. If you do not sleep, there's even something, I don't know if you guys know this, there's something called the glymphatic system in your brain and spinal cord. This was only discovered in the 90s. We actually have, you know how your heart, you have a circulatory system and your heart is a pump, right? Does anybody know about the lymphatic system? What's the pump of your lymphatic system? Does anybody know? No?
Skin.
Nope. The muscles of your quadriceps. So if you don't move, your immune system is going to be compromised.
Take a walk.
Take a walk. So that's what I was doing. It was the 10. Everybody was here yesterday. I made everybody do 10 air squats. So the glymphatic system, which is in our brain, it pumps and literally is brainwashing in a good way. It's cleaning out the toxins. So you hear it, I'm sure you heard about like Alzheimer's. You talked about brain decline. So this idea of the amyloid plaques, that gets washed in deep wave sleep. So if you're not getting enough deep sleep, you're putting yourself on the pathway to cognitive decline. Okay? So prioritize sleep. How do you prioritize sleep? You have to align your circadian rhythm with nature. Sunlight. So I'll give you guys all an exercise you can do that's called a circadian reset. I've taught this to like thousands of people. If you actually do it, probably most people won't do it, but if you actually do it, this can be life-changing for you. I guarantee it. So get up in the morning. Try to get up as early as you can. I'm not going to tell you, that's different. That's bio-individual. Ideally, there's a signal that the sun is sending to your brain when it's below 30 degrees. So that depending on the time of year, that's relatively early after sunrise. So you can look at this because below 30 degrees, there's a different spectrum of light that's coming to you from the sun. Get that spectrum of light not through a window, into your eyes, not through sunglasses, into your retina. So go for a morning walk, go do some breath work. Ideally, you're actually physically standing with your feet on the grass of the earth. You're just a big battery. You're a big house plant walking around, okay? So you need to get sun, bless you. You need to get sun, you get your feet on the earth, you get that sun exposure into your eyeball for at least 15 minutes before you look at your phone, before you look at your computer, before you get any blue light. Don't even turn on the lights in your house. Get the natural sunlight into your eye for like 15 minutes. Ideally, just go for a morning walk. 1.5, minimum, yeah.
And I'm already up at 4 in the morning.
Yeah, if you're already up very early, so if you get up that early in the morning, then I'm going to talk about the other side of that before you go to bed, which is also very important. But this is really a key thing. So just when the sun does come up, try it. Even if you're at work at that time, see if you can take a break and get like 15 minutes and just go outside, do some movement, do some breath work every day. Every day, 15 minutes. If you want to live a long life, you got to be committed. So 15 minutes, get the morning sun into your eyeball, right? And I'm not saying stare at the sun, right? But it actually, at that level, when it's below 30 degrees, your eye can absorb it in a different way. So it could just be taking your dog for a walk. That's all I do. I take my dog for a 30-minute walk every morning, first thing, before I do anything else. Don't look at my phone. Don't do anything. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200, right? Go do that.
Your dog loves you.
Yeah. So I do that every morning, first thing, and sometimes I'll do some movement, some breath work, maybe even some intention setting, right? Like what I want to achieve that day for 15 minutes. On the other side, the most important, and I try not to look at my phone for the first hour as well, so that I can be with my own thoughts, so I'm not stressing about the world, because stress kills. 2 hours before bed, turn off the electronics. Try not to have overhead lights, because overhead light is the brain thinks it's the sun is still up. And the blue light from our devices is also disrupting our circadian rhythms. So ideally, there's 2 hours. So my house looks like a submarine. Drives my wife crazy. I make us only have amber and red lights at night.
That's all I have.
Yeah. So that, so the closer you can align your lifestyle with the circadian rhythm of nature. Has anyone here ever gone camping? And then like at 9 o'clock when the sun goes down, you're ready to go to sleep. Like you can't stay up. When you align with the rhythm of nature, when the sun goes down, your body just like, right? Because that's actually a chemical reaction. There's this sleep chemical called, everyone's heard of melatonin, but there's a relationship between melatonin and adenosine, which is the wake up, and the cortisol. So in the morning, you actually want the cortisol to kick in. The sun gets into your eye, tells your brain to turn on like a light switch. So prioritize sleep, prioritize circadian rhythm. Okay, so that's one big bucket. Other big bucket, exercise. You can't get away with exercise. And as we get older, the reason people are unhealthy is not because they're not just exercise, but we're under-muscled in the modern world. So, if you can build muscle, you can build muscle in the body, that's really the ultimate life extension. One of the biggest predictors of long-term life is, so you got to prioritize exercise. And like I said, your immune system is pumped because you don't have a pump for your lymphatic system. It's your quadriceps. So just, like you told yesterday, doing 10 air squats every 45 minutes. If you did 10 air squats every 45 minutes, you would live longer. I guarantee it. That's a lot of commitment, right? Maybe, but it's 2 minutes? 10 minutes a day, even if you don't do it every 45 minutes. If you did 10 air squats, do these micro movement snacks. We call them movement snacks. So you're sitting at your computer for 8 hours, get up, go for a walk, do 10 air squats, do, on the plane, I was telling people, do soleus push-ups. That's just literally going like this while you're sitting for your calves. So sleep. exercise,
In the
nutrition.
Netherlands, we say bike to work and stuff.
Yes,
and go grocery
yeah,
stores
yeah.
biking.
Or in
Helps a
Europe,
lot.
they're walking all the time or they're cycling all the time. That's also why they're happier and living longer. Okay, I'm almost done. So sleep, exercise, nutrition. This one's tough because I can't tell you what is your nutritional program that's good for you. Some people do better on plant-based, some people do better on keto, some people do, that's the combination of genetic, microbiome, all this stuff. I'll give you a really generic thing you can look up because it's the best I have without doing your labs, and that's something called Eat Right for Your Type. Anybody ever heard of this? Yeah, you look at your blood type, and your blood type does tell us a little bit about your genetic ancestry. And so, like I have a paleo blood type, so I do better on keto. I tried to be plant-based, it made me sick. So you can do that, it's a simple one, but invest effort into figuring out what you need to do for your nutrition. So sleep, nutrition, exercise. The fourth one that we often talk about, and this is the mental health piece, right? Is we talk about the quality of your relationships. They talk about mental health, it's generic, but that's the quality of your relationships. That's really important. And then the fifth thing, and these two are the more ephemerals, but these are the things you guys work with more than I do, that I'm trying to introduce to my community, is the quality of your relationships is important, and also spiritual purpose, which came up where? It was here somewhere.
Yeah, meaning and fulfillment.
Yeah, meaning and fulfillment. So that, again, a lot of this is about you becoming your own advocate for your health and figuring out what works best for you. But on the biological side, like I said, that sleep, exercise, nutrition, you can figure out. And if you need help, you know, there's a lot of tools. If you want to learn from the community, there's going to be the happiness model here. I produce a lot of events where I work with a lot of people who can help you figure those things out. So with that said, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Peter. And thank you all for being here.
I had to hand this over when you were done. Thank you.